Now, if you're traveling from the Middle East or North Africa to the US, your flight may have just become a little bit more complicated. The US Department of Homeland Security has told airlines in the region to block passengers from carrying large electronic items like laptops and cameras into the cabin. They will instead have to go into your checked baggage. The DHS says it's a move meant to prevent terrorists from blowing up planes, and now the UK has followed America's lead and implemented its own restrictions. Now, the ban covers laptops, computers, tablets, e-readers and cameras, basically anything that is not a phone or a medical device. It affects direct flights to the US from these 10 airports: Amman in Jordan, Kuwait City, Cairo, Istanbul, Jeddah, Riyadh, Casablanca, Morocco, Doha, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. In total, about 50 flights a day on these 9 major regional airlines could be affected. Among them, the big 3 Middle Eastern carriers, Emirates, Qatar Airways and Etihad. Now, these companies have increased their flights into the US by 47% since the beginning of 2015, much to the anger of the big US airlines United, Delta and American. They say Middle Eastern flag carriers enjoy massive state subsidies. We reached out to the International Air Transport Association for their reaction to the ban. In a statement, they said IATA is working with its members and the US Transportation Security Administration to achieve greater clarity on required actions. Meanwhile, Turkish Airlines put this notice up on their website reading, "We kindly inform our passengers that any electronic or electrical devices larger than a cell phone or smartphone, except for medical devices, must not be transported on board in our flights arriving in US destinations." And Turkey's Transportation Minister Ahmet Arslan has objected to the restriction, urging the US, quote, "not to confuse Istanbul with other places." We caught up with some business travellers at Istanbul's Ataturk airport to get their reactions to the ban.
I guess it is another racism decision of Donald Trump. If my stuff get broken, who's gonna pay for it?
I think it is not. It will not be good because most of passenger will not be comfortable from this process. Because it will not be easy. Most of business people, they will use the laptop in the plane, and also the bag for laptop included important documents, and sometimes he want to review the documents or he want to save with him, and I think this issue, it will not be perfect. Yeah.
I'm one of the frequent flyers, traveling very frequently. And for me, the most important thing is to working while I'm traveling. So this definitely forbids myself to work while I'm traveling. And the question is why we are traveling in these countries: in order to interact, in order to increase our interaction with them face to face. And this is not going to happen.
I think it is so ridiculous, and it has nothing to do with terrorism. It is not a threat at all. And when they ask us to put our computers in our suitcases, it is ridiculous because they risk to be broken. Once again, as Muslims, we are harassed.
Let's stay on this story now. Joining me from New York is Andrew Shivachman. He's a senior writer at travel industry website Skift. Andrew, thank you ever so much for joining us here on Money Talks. Let me start by asking you, how badly is this ban going to disrupt business travel to the US?
I think to begin with, it's unseen. What this does do is create a lot of uncertainty surrounding business travel. And as you see, with the UK stepping up with their own electronics ban, it's likely we might see even more disruption.
So the big 3 US carriers, as we mentioned there, have been lobbying the Trump administration to do something about the very rapid growth of Middle Eastern airlines. Now, we're not conspiracy theorists here on Money Talks, but could there be some advantage going to the US carriers as a result of this ban?
I think it's possible. On a call with senior administration officials last night, it was mentioned that this is in response to a specific terror threat, but they didn't give any details. Meanwhile, last month, President Trump met with members of the US aviation industry and mentioned looking at the open skies agreements again, which dictate where airlines can fly over international borders. So I think there's probably a grain of truth to that.
Tell us a little bit more about the impact that Middle Eastern carriers have had on business travel, in particular in and out of the US. What sort of impact in terms of revenues and everything has it had on their bottom line, and also in terms of business travel in the US?
Sure. I mean, the Middle Eastern carriers, Gulf carriers, have been huge because they're running a lot of direct routes from the Middle East to the US, and these are routes that are not served by US carriers. And at the same time, you have Gulf carriers being underwritten by the states that they are operating in. And so the concern in the US is that this is an unfair playing field. But for flyers, this is great news, and any disruption to the Gulf carriers will ultimately hurt travelers.
Yeah, now, since 9/11, there have been many restrictions, some of which have come and gone. Is there any way of quantifying how much these kinds of restrictions have on airlines or on travel in terms of volume?
I think you're going to see a small decrease in volume at first, but as time goes on, since this ban from the US is apparently unlimited, you will see people put off trips, decide to go to other locations, particularly in business. So I think that the ramifications in the end could be pretty severe if France or Germany follows the UK's lead. This could have a domino effect and affect global business travel.
Andrew Shivachman, senior writer at travel industry website Skift from New York. Thank you ever so much.